Recall your perfect squares and perfect square roots. So squaring a number, as you see on the left side of the screen, is the reverse process of finding the square root of a number, which is what you see on the right-hand screen. So you're going to have to get familiar with your perfect roots, especially when you want to factor perfect squared trinomials. Perfect square variables. A variable is a perfect square if its exponent is an even number. Again, a variable is a perfect square if its exponent is an even number. So all you have to do is divide the exponent by 2. And the reason you divide by 2 is because the index of a square root is a 2. So 2 divided by 2 equals 1, and that's why it equals just x by itself with an exponent of 1. The square root of x to the 4th power, 4 divided by 2 equals 2, and that's why it equals x squared. In this lesson, we will learn how to factor a perfect square trinomial. So far, we've been working with several trinomials, but this time we're going to work with a special type of trinomial. It is called a perfect square trinomial. A perfect square trinomial will always result in the square of binomial. In other words, it's going to equal some binomial squared. Here's how you can spot or identify a perfect square trinomial. If you have a trinomial and you notice that the first and the last terms are perfect square roots, in other words, the square root of x squared is x, the square root of 49 is 7, if you take what their square root equals and multiply that with the number 2, and it gives you your middle term, then that is a perfect square trinomial. It will always factor into those 2 terms that you found the square root of the first and the last term. So that's x plus 7 squared. Now, if you wonder where the sign comes from, just keep in mind that the sign will always be the same as the middle term. So the sign inside the binomial will always be the same as the middle term. Another way you can write your result, instead of the little 2 there, the exponent, and actually recall what exponents are, that means in this case that you have 2 of the very same thing. You can write it in squared, quantity squared form, or you can simply put both side by side, and there you have it. This is a perfect square trinomial. Now, I just want you to know, if you aren't able to recognize a perfect square trinomial, you can still solve it using all those methods that we learned in a previous section. AC factor by grouping, trial and error, bottoms up, cross multiply. Any of those methods, you can still factor this trinomial. But I'm just saying, if you are able to spot and know that it is a perfect square trinomial, you can solve it a lot quicker. So let's go ahead and solve this one. So if you look at the first term, that is a perfect square root. The last term is also a perfect square root because the square root of 1 is 1. What is the square root of 100x squared? If you said 10x, that is correct. So recall that we just take the square root of the first and last term, and if we were to multiply the number 2 with that if it gave us our middle term, which it does in this case, that's a perfect square trinomial, and it's going to factor into what you see circled there, the result of those two perfect square roots. In terms of the sign, remember the sign is going to be the same as the middle term. So what does this factor into? You got it, 10x plus 1 squared. That is your answer. And there you have a perfect square trinomial. Let's factor this perfect square trinomial. So you're going to find the square root of 9r squared, and you're also going to find the square root of 4s squared. Remember what I told you of how to find the square root of variables. So what is the square root of 9r squared? If you said 3r, that is correct. And the square root of 4s? If you said 2s, that is correct. Now remember, if you were to take the number 2 and multiply it with those numbers, if it gives you your middle term, which it does, then that's how you know it's a perfect square trinomial. And can you tell me what this one will factor into? That is correct. 3r minus 2s quantity squared. And there you have it, a perfect square trinomial. Okay, that's it for this lesson. Thank you for watching MVP Tutorials by your instructor, Dr. Speights. I hope you'll join me in the next lesson. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe. Goodbye for now.